better way to celebrate Halloween than diving into the dark histories of vampires, werewolves, and spellcasters. On their own, each one already has centuries of chaos, legends, and bloodshed. But their stories are so intertwined that you can't truly understand one without exploring the others. And once you see how deep those connections go, you start to view these occults in a completely different light. Today, we'll explore how spellcasters were responsible for the creation and enslavement of vampires, how vampires eventually rose up against them, and how that war gave birth to the very first werewolves. I really recommend you watch this video if you're into lore, because almost every piece of content regarding this topic online is just wrong, missing critical information or otherwise providing contradictory evidence to in-game text. But before we dive in, do you like playing occults? Because the Sims series is packed with them. Fairies, zombies, ghosts, robots, the frickin' Bigfoot, way too many for just one video. You can make deep dives like this possible at mynameisgonz.com. That's where I share early access to new videos, behind the scenes stuff, and let patrons vote on which stories I cover next. If you think that I simply open up the Sims wiki and regurgitate what's there, that's not true. I actually replay all of the content, grab my own primary sources, and then write my scripts because, as I will prove today, you can only trust yourself. That's why these take so long to make. So if you enjoy the video and want to see more deep dives like this, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment below telling me your favorite moment. And don't forget, after you subscribe, click the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Alright, so now let's sit back and go all the way back to the beginning of all things in ancient lands long forgotten. In ancient times, a great civilization called Myshupotamia thrived in the land we now know as Moonwood Mill. The Myshupotamians believed the wisest among them were reborn as wolves, who stored their knowledge in the moon through their howls. As each lunar cycle passed, the growing light of the moon represented the accumulation of that wisdom. When the full moon rose, the people would wear wolf-like masks and channel its energy to draw upon the moon's stored knowledge. As the light faded, they believed the wisdom flowed back to them, spreading across the land and onto their minds once more. The Myshupotamians also mastered the art of taming cow plants, using them as both guardians and weapons. In time, their civilization disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But their experiments with lunar energy and living magic would lay the foundation for forces far greater than they could ever imagine, setting the stage for the catastrophic events that soon followed. It's unknown how spellcasters first came to be, but we do know that seekers of knowledge gathered in the land of Glimmerbrook, where they discovered the gateway to the magic realm, the otherworldly source of all magic on the planet. Within this realm, they uncovered the great schools of magic. Practical magic focused on improving the daily lives of Sims, mischief magic, which allowed them to deceive and disorient, alchemy to brew potions of war, and untamed magic, which granted mastery over life itself. For millennia, spellcasters studied these arts, bonded with magical familiars, and pushed the limits of reality. In their pursuit of knowledge, they created the Duplicado spell, a powerful enchantment that produced perfect replicas under the creator's control. These clones handled the tedious chores of cleaning, repairing, and maintenance, freeing their masters to continue their studies. But even magical copies needed food and rest. Seeking to eliminate these weaknesses, spellcasters began experimenting, feeding their clones enchanted potions meant to strip away mortal needs. Instead, the magic corrupted them. The clones mutated, becoming unstable and dangerous. Eventually, the Duplicado spell itself began to overload, turning temporary copies into permanent beings no longer bound to their creators. The freed clones rebelled, draining their master's magical plasma and transforming into the first vampires. Immortal, powerful, and eternally thirsty, the vampires rose against their creators, sparking what history remembers as the centuries' conflict. Vladislaus Straud was the first and most powerful of all vampires. He launched Operation Eternal Flame with one goal in mind: to turn every remaining spellcaster into a vampire. Desperate to stop him, the spellcasters searched for ancient magic that could shift the balance of the war. That search led them to the teachings of the Myshupotamians. In the forest of Moonwood, groups of spellcasters uncovered their lost knowledge and learned to harness lunar energy and tame cow plants. From this discovery, two factions emerged: the Mooncasters, devoted to moon magic, and the Mooncasters, masters of cow plant power. To move quickly and secretly between regions, they built tunnels connecting Glimmerbrook, Moonwood, and the land that would later be known as Forgotten Hollow, a place not yet under vampire control. The war claimed many lives, and at one point, the spellcasters even managed to capture Vlad himself, imprisoning him in the underground tunnels before he eventually escaped. In a final act of defiance, 5 Mooncasters who had bonded with their wolf familiars climbed to the top of Howling Point to perform a powerful lunar ritual. Gregorius and Avelina Lundvik, Maria and John Volkov, and Yina Kai raised their wands together and cast an untamed spell meant to grant them new strength. The spell worked, but at a terrible cost. Its magic surged through the land, infusing Moonwood with raw lunar energy and binding the spellcasters to their wolf familiars, transforming them into the first werewolves. With their newfound power, the werewolves brought the fight back to the vampires. But tragedy struck when Yina Kai was devoured by a cowplant during a joint mission, sparking division between the Mooncasters and Mooncasters and giving the vampires the upper hand. Growing desperate, 3 master spellcasters, Tess Dyer, Keisha Hughes, and Ethan Reyes, gathered in the magic realm to cast a combined spell meant to cure all vampires. The spell was too powerful. Though it succeeded in transforming many, it began to tear at the fabric of the magic realm itself, threatening to collapse it entirely. Using the last of their strength, Tess, Keisha, and Ethan stopped time itself to restore balance and prevent the realm's destruction. Bound by their act, they became the first sages of the realm of magic, destined to maintain that balance forever. In the aftermath, the surviving vampires vanished into hiding. The werewolves retreated to Moonwood and Forgotten Hollow to learn control over the new powers, and the spellcasters sealed themselves within the magic realm. And while the centuries' conflict had come to an end, the story was far from over. The former Mooncasters were immediately divided over how to handle their new powers. Maria and John Volkov, blessed with the nobility and calm of their wolf companions, chose to master their fury rather than be ruled by it. They founded the town of Moonwood Mill and formed a community known as the Moonwood Collective. The collective devoted itself to lumber milling, turning Moonwood into a thriving town. Even spellcasters from the magic realm sought wands crafted from its lunar-imbued trees. Greg, however, had inherited the raw power and fury of his alpha wolf companion. He believed true strength lay in embracing that rage and pushed himself to uncover the full potential of werewolves. Greg and Avelina were fated mates. The two had fallen in love in Glimmerbrook after Greg had moved away from Old San Myshuno, escaping his strict mother and the fate of running her textile empire. Thus, Avelina, driven by her deep fascination with the moon, dedicated herself entirely to helping Greg control his fury. Meanwhile, Maria and John had a son named Kristopher. Together, the Volkovs welcomed werewolves, spellcasters, and ordinary Sims alike to live in harmony within their growing town. But Greg never forgave the spellcasters for Yina's death. He withdrew from society and often clashed with Maria over what was best for werewolf kind. As years passed, his rage grew uncontrollable. Avelina poured all her time and energy into saving him, neglecting her own well-being. Despite her devotion, Greg's outbursts worsened, leaving their home in ruins time and time again. Then one day, Greg returned from a rampage to find his beloved Avelina dead. Consumed by grief and fury, he lost all control. Greg tore through Moonwood Mill, driving out every non-werewolf in terror and demolishing the central mill before dragging its remains deep into the old tunnels. The town was left in ruins, and the Moonwood Collective was shattered. Greg retreated to his lonely cabin in the woods, posting warnings for others to stay away, and never took his human form again. Old and weary, Maria and John eventually passed leadership of the collective to their son Kristopher, before passing away together in peace. Determined to restore what his parents had built, Kristopher set out to find werewolves around the world who needed a place to belong, but he couldn't have known that an ancient enemy was about to return. As Kristopher traveled the world, he quickly realized not everyone welcomed him. Prejudice followed wherever he went, and he often overheard whispers comparing vampires' supposed grace and charm to the stinking brutes that were werewolves. It didn't take long for Kristopher to understand what was happening. They had returned. He had returned. Vladislaus Straud had survived the century's conflict. Now, he'd launched Operation Haifang, a propaganda campaign designed to turn the world against werewolves by painting them as violent, savage creatures compared to the refined image of vampires. And the plan worked. Vlad's influence spread like wildfire, and before long, he'd rallied a mob determined to wipe out the werewolves from the land that would one day become Forgotten Hollow. They struck without mercy, slaughtering or driving out the werewolf settlers. The few who survived fled through the tunnels back to Moonwood Mill. Vlad claimed the land for himself and named it Forgotten Hollow. To celebrate their victory, the mob erected a statue in Vlad's honor. But one by one, those same mob members began to vanish. When only Vlad remained, he spun a new tale. He invited fresh settlers to the town, claiming he and his group had been the victims of a terrible accident that killed everyone but him. The lie secured his reputation as both survivor and hero, cementing his rule over Forgotten Hollow for centuries to come. In the years that followed, Vlad scoured the world for disciples to aid in his growing empire. His first was Mary Belle Smith, a young woman who took great pride in her bright, even teeth. But when Vlad attacked her and turned her into a vampire, she was horrified. Her once blunt teeth had become sharp, and her reflection was gone. Filled with hatred for what she'd become, she renamed herself Miss Hell. Together, Vlad and Miss Hell hunted two young siblings, Caleb and Lilith Vatore, along with their cousin, Lily Zu. Unlike Miss Hell, Lilith was drawn to Vlad's charm and curiosity. She spent long nights with him, learning the dark arts, and despite Lily's warnings, she eventually accepted his dark gift. Caleb, meanwhile, fell under Miss Hell's sway and was turned by her. Yet he was unlike any other vampire. Even under Vlad's mentorship, Caleb despised feeding on other Sims' plasma and possessed a rare ability to walk in the sunlight. Lily, desperate to save her cousins, followed them to Forgotten Hollow, but her plan went terribly wrong. Hiding in the tunnels beneath the town, she encountered a feral werewolf who attacked and turned her. Alone and confused, Lily roamed the tunnels for years, lost to her new instincts, while Lilith and Caleb remained in Forgotten Hollow to continue their studies under Vlad. Eventually, Miss Hell abandoned Vlad, forming her own group of rebellious vampires who sought to live free of his control. Centuries passed, and the world of magic continued to evolve. A young Morgan Ember studied under the great sage Tess Dyer and would one day succeed her as the Sage of Untamed Magic. Keisha Hughes passed her mantle to Elphaba, and Ethan Reyes entrusted his to Simeon Silversweater. And as the years rolled on, both Lilith and Caleb grew disillusioned with Vlad's rule. They fought for peace between vampires and Sims, championing alternative nourishment sources and an end to needless bloodshed. Caleb even turned a young woman named Innocence, helping to form new clans that opposed Vlad's tyranny. Meanwhile, deep beneath Forgotten Hollow, Kristopher Volkov stumbled upon someone he never expected, the Vatore's long-lost cousin, the feral Lily Zu. He taught her how to control her fury and brought her back to Moonwood Mill, setting the stage for the final chapter in our story. Kristopher had rebuilt the Moonwood Collective from the ground up. With Lily by his side, the two worked hard to make Moonwood Mill a welcoming place again. Now that Lily remembered who she truly was, she was heartbroken to learn what had happened to her cousins. For years, she focused on one thing: the hope of reuniting with Lilith and Caleb and rebuilding the bond they once shared. But because of Operation Haifang and the lasting hatred between vampires and werewolves, that dream felt almost impossible. Even so, Lily refused to give up. She took the gift of immortality, vowing to live until she could see her family again. During a visit to Brindleton Bay, Kristopher came across a young girl who'd been kicked out of her home after being bitten by a feral dog. Her name was Rory Oaklow. The bite had infected her with lycanthropy, turning her into a werewolf. After her first transformation, her parents threw her out, forcing her to survive on her own. Kristopher found her, told her about Moonwood Mill, and welcomed her into his pack. Rory was strong-willed and independent, spending much of her time learning about her powers while often clashing with Kristopher about how to control them. Sometime later, in Evergreen Harbor, Kristopher met another young werewolf named Jacob. Jacob remembered little about his past, only a fire and being chased through the woods by both a vampire and a werewolf. Though he escaped the vampire, he was bitten by the werewolf and transformed before Kristopher found him. Kristopher adopted Jacob and brought him home to Moonwood Mill. Jacob quickly bonded with Rory, and the two became as close as siblings. Jacob was everything Kristopher hoped for in a student. He valued discipline, balance, and compassion. He even became a vegetarian to avoid harming any living creature. Eventually, he took Kristopher's surname and became Jacob Volkov, something Rory chose not to do. As they grew older, Jacob and Rory stayed close, but her relationship with Kristopher began to crumble. Rory's desire to master her power and uncover the secret to immortality grew stronger, while Kristopher's memories of Greg's downfall made him fear where that path could lead. When they could no longer agree, Rory left to discover what being a werewolf truly meant to her. Meanwhile, Moonwood Mill continued to grow, attracting both werewolves and regular Sims. Among the newcomers were Wolfgang Wilder, Celine Lopez, and Lou Howell. Wolfgang came from San Myshuno, seeking peace from the chaos of city life. Through Kristopher, he learned the real history of werewolves and the struggles they faced. His curiosity turned to understanding, and he eventually asked Kristopher to turn him into a werewolf. Wolfgang restored the old mill and turned it into a library. He began writing under the pen name Wolfgang Mulder, publishing books that aimed to undo the damage caused by Operation Haifang and show the world the kindness and humanity of werewolves. Lou Howell arrived with a darker past. A thief on the run, he hoped Moonwood Mill would be a good hiding place. Celine Lopez had dreamed of werewolves since childhood. She read everything she could about them and longed to live among them. Being one of the few Sims in town, Celine soon caught Lou's eye. Their first date started off well until they heard the faint cries of a child deep in the woods. Ignoring every warning sign, Lou followed the sound despite Celine's pleas to turn back. That decision brought them face to face with Greg. Lou tried to reason with him, but Greg was long past reason. He attacked them both, leaving them badly injured and infected with werebees, a sickness that, if untreated, leads to full transformation. But luckily, Kristopher was there to help. Celine, terrified by what she'd seen, chose to be cured, even though she'd always dreamt of becoming a werewolf. Lou, however, refused help. He was convinced he could fight it off, but he was wrong. When Kristopher refused to let him join the Moonwood Collective, believing Lou's selfishness would cause harm, Lou went searching for a place where he belonged. He found Rory, and together they formed the Wild Fangs. Their mission was to master their fury and unlock the full potential of their power, not out of anger, but from pride and discipline. Celine chose to remain in Moonwood Mill without joining any pack. With help from both the Wild Fangs and the Moonwood Collective, she opened the Grimtooth Bar, a welcoming place for everyone to gather and unwind. She later used her love for hairstyling to start dyeing werewolf fur, often testing her ideas on her friends. And so Moonwood Mill entered an era of peace and community. Kristopher hoped that Jacob would carry on his legacy and continue guiding future generations of werewolves so he could pass on just like his parents. Whether that peace will last or if vampires will rise again is uncertain. But for now, the werewolves of Moonwood Mill can rest easy, enjoying the calm they fought so hard to earn. And that wraps up the legendary tale of how the hubris of spellcasters led to the creation of werewolves and vampires, and how their conflict nearly brought about their mutual destruction. There's a lot to unpack in these stories, and I wanted to tell it in a way that flows chronologically, letting everything unfold as it actually happened instead of jumping between packs. Let me know what you think about this format down in the comments. It might not work for every townie deep dive, but I think it fits this one pretty well. There are a few things I want to touch on that didn't quite fit into the main storyline. They're not easily provable, but they're too interesting not to mention. As you probably noticed in part 2, it's said that Vlad was the first vampire, which logically suggests there must have been a spellcaster who looked exactly like him. That idea also implies the original spellcaster Vlad may have been responsible for creating the clones and experiments that later fueled his hatred towards spellcasters. My friend Jeremy Gone Wild has a fascinating theory that the Night Wraith, the cursed ghost who haunts spellcasters when they overload their magic, might actually be the ghost of the original spellcaster Vlad. It's definitely a stretch, but honestly, such a fun concept to think about if it turned out to be true. I also didn't mention that Vlad supposedly had a cousin named Arthur Climate who appeared in the Sims 4 Season's blog post, or that he once ran a successful hardware business revealed in Get Famous. Those details didn't really fit the theme of this story and don't carry much narrative weight, so I left them out. Additionally, Enchanted by Nature revealed that fairies and werewolves have a kinship given that their powers were derived by the moon. Fairies also have the unique gift of curing the vampire disease, which is interesting given that the vampire pack included a fairy statue that was bowing in reverence to vampires years before Enchanted by Nature came out. As for Glimmerbrook, I skipped over some of its residents since they don't have a major impact on the broader timeline, but let's talk about them briefly. We already covered Morgan Ember, Elphaba, and Simeon Silversweater, the current sages of the Magic Realm, but the game hints that each of them is training new apprentices. Elphaba mentors Gemma Charm, Simeon trains Daryl Charm, and Morgan teaches Grace Anansi, Tomax Colette, and Amelia Ernest, with Grace standing out as the likely future sage of Untamed Magic. The Charm family itself, led by matriarch Minerva Charm, has produced powerful spellcasters for generations. Minerva personally knows each of the current sages, which says a lot about her influence and the family's long-standing importance in the magical world. That concludes the complete history of werewolves, vampires, and spellcasters in The Sims 4. As always, making long-form videos, daily shorts, and working a full-time job takes a ton of effort. So if you'd like to support what I do, subscribing through mynameisgonz.com really helps keep these projects going. These videos wouldn't be possible without the amazing viewers on screen right now. Your support means the world to me, and I can't thank you enough. Oh, and if you want to hang out, play The Sims, and maybe get a little unhinged with me, come join the chaos Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 PM Eastern over on twitch.tv/mynameisgonz. The link's in the doobly-doo. Alright, stay curious, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next one.